Okay, so coming up is a set piece that it took me 7 attempts to find a solution for. And as a result, I'm doing a very carefully prepared approach. So this is a bit more practice than most of this LP has been, but hopefully it's useful. This is basically what happens immediately. It's the next thing to do after the Tower of the Watsits. You can go around, explore places, stock up, fortunately, heal up, and then you're supposed to work out you need to go to Namara, where we see this guy, who, if you'll remember on disc 2, I spent quite a lot of time wandering around this statue, trying to poke at it and see whether it would come alive. I was expecting it to be an optional boss, but it's a plot set piece. And there's this implausible idea of these things being a trap. There doesn't seem to be any meaningful limit to Gongora's powers, or to ever have been either. Given that the trap was set some 30 years in the past. Anyway, this encounter is a colossal pain. This itself is not actually the set piece that took the time. The encounter is quite simple, but it's rough. And I'm using a very specific strategy, which I will take slowly on the first try. And then there are 4 more of these coming up, where it will have to go quite quickly. And all these absurdly long combat intro animations will get really annoying really quick. So, we're using combo, because it basically doubles your physical damage. And we're using Powerus, because that doubles things up again. Mac is in the party because he natively has Powerus. There's also a very specific skill setup for defense, particularly against this move, which is devastating but also fire elemental. It doesn't matter much if it hits the back row because they get the full benefit of my GC, to the extent that that is, if all the dude does is hit my back row with Heat Breath, that's the best possible option. It's if it starts hitting the front row with anything that we have problems. Its other attack, it only has the 2 attacks, Heat Breath and a physical attack. Its physical attacks have an on-hit Petrify that goes straight to instantly full Petrified, which is frankly disgusting. And occasionally I need to heal. Here's the physical attack. Occasionally I need to heal on the last turn, on the second turn, set a heal on the second turn with Cook, but shouldn't do this time. There's a slight problem that Mac is a tiny bit underleveled, but he's doing enough damage. So now we are into the final turn of the fight. This one has gone really well. I want to be defending as much as possible with the casters because defending takes less time, and real-time pressure is going to be a thing shortly. I hope they all go that well. So I'm going to skip the tutorial. Please excuse the sounds of my mashing. Pausing in best possible time is quite important. and I have stocked up like mad on mana capsules because I want the quick refills and to be absolutely sure that I'm getting a refill every time. The way this works, there are 4 Arthrosaurs making their way to Numara. You have to beat them all, and they keep moving while you're in combat. The ones you're not in combat with keep moving while you're in combat. So we are under time pressure to input commands, which sucks. One of the most loathsome pieces of design I've ever seen in a JRPG. Particularly because all this animation time as well counts against us. Also, my thumb suddenly feels very, very sluggish indeed. Back row, come on, back row. If it's back row, I don't have to do a heal. Yes, okay. RNG likes me so far. Even if I do everything perfectly, this strategy only has a couple of seconds of leeway. So it's going to be very, very tight by the end, but it's also going to take ages. All my characters have petrified proof, except I think Cook, because she's the one I can most afford to lose a turn from, provided it's not the first turn. No. No. This doesn't really matter now. The only problem with it is it's the longer animation of the two. Oh, thank God. I got a bit worried there. Please skip the animation. One thing I can't do is go into an encounter without having healed. I think we're going to be okay. It's probably too early to tell. I'd much rather have an honest-to-God timer as well, rather than the map. The map isn't large enough to show enough information. No, no. Also, no, that was bad. That's okay, I think. The absolute problem is if he does heat breath on the front row on the first turn and heat breath on the back row on the second turn, because that will kill people on the back row, because there won't be enough GC left to reduce the damage. I think this one is... No, wait, shit. No, you're fire, so there we go. that wasted actual time. But so far we're on quick animations from this guy, so that might make up for it. I'm very much in speedrunner territory here, which isn't a bad thing in its own right. I like speedruns, but in the middle of what's otherwise a quite tranquil game, it's a bit much. And the big problem with this set piece is that it comes out of nowhere and it really it just doesn't feel well thought out, which is a problem with a lot of this game's interesting ideas. You could do an interesting set piece like this, but not this way. Or at least you'd have to put more effort into it. I think we're making good time though. Where I think this goes wrong is the attempt to literalize combat time, which is absolutely part and parcel of what the whole Travel Notes project is about, really. Because one of the things that JRPGs get hammered for is the temporal abstraction of their combat. No. I'm panicking. There we go. By which I mean people really object these days, or seem to turn-based combat, to kind of waiting around, standing around. And I think that was a particular issue in the sort of 2006 to 9 period that I'm looking at. Particularly with it being a theme in the Western press, and a lot of games like Lost Odyssey being made for the 360 for an assumed global audience rather than specifically for a Japanese audience and then adapted. What do I think this one is going to be? Yes. I think we're doing okay. I was marginally ahead of my successful attempt getting to this encounter. Who's going to get it? I've had much friendlier enemy AI than I did on the successful off-stream attempt. But this is, you know, it's a way of, clearly the designers thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could do a real-time combat set piece? It's not the most obvious version of that. And we've already seen Lost Odyssey has a couple of timed escape sequences that where the timer ticks while you're in combat, but it doesn't tick through quite as much of combat, and you don't have to string, kind of consciously and deliberately string encounters together the way I'm doing here. But it's an example of innovating away from. You know, responding to a... Oops. So this is how close it is. He only has to get to that little promontory of land just to the right, and it's game over. And it's a full game over as well. You restart from the beginning of the 4 Arthrosaurs if you accept the checkpoint. But yes, this is an example of innovating away from. We're off the time pressure now, thank God. So I can chill out and make sure I put all the right commands in. And I don't need to worry if the Arthrosaur gets mean, which it might well do. But they're innovating away from seeing a design staple being criticised, i.e. turn-based combat, and just doing anything that comes into your head to avoid it, rather than perhaps trying to draw on established models. Like, by the time this game came out, there were Kingdom Hearts games and Tales games galore that have real-time combat, and it works just fine. And like, you can do things like this. Breath of Fire, which we're playing for the podcast at the moment, has a fantastic time section, which is what's your element? Water. What do we use against water? Ground, I think. Also note that Arthrosaurs... Has there been one of every element? I don't think there has. This time I will actually queue up a heal. Sorry, I lost a train of thought. Yeah, Breath of Fire has a dungeon that's mostly underwater, and it has a breath timer. And the breath timer is a countdown when you're exploring. It just ticks down 1 second per second. But when you're in combat, it ticks down 1 second per action, ally and enemy actions alike. It also starts ticking if you spend too long in menu, but it just gives you that little bit more breathing space, rather than things being determined by the potential absurdities of attack animation lengths, which this game, the attack animation lengths make a huge difference. We have quite detailed attack animations, but they go on forever, which again is a technological issue. But we're done. Thank heavens. Note that Ming at level 42 didn't get enough XP from that even to level up. I do want to say, I think that could have been a cool set piece if it had been contextualised differently and tuned to give you just a tiny bit longer. So what I would have liked to have seen is it being relatively easy to complete in a couple of attempts to actually succeed at it. But then you need to do the fine-tuned, super optimized strategy, which, like, that's my 8th attempt at. To get some, like, extra special reward or something, like some of the Calmlands minigames in FF10. This game does keep reminding me of FF10, but we're not going to the port of Namara, because that's where the next chunk of plot is, and I want to heal and stock up. Which I have been using Tosca Village.